That was harder than I thought.
Remember how we said it wasn't going to be a long one today?
It was a long one today, wasn't it?
Was it good, though?
I think so.
Welcome to the 17th segment, an official podcast of Good Morning BT.
Just take it from the top.
Like episode 1 all over again.
Except it's not. Are we going?
He can be.
We're rolling?
Which means we are. If you have to ask, you are.
Isn't that how you wanted it to work?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the 17th segment. It's been a minute. We took about a month, a little over a month off from
We went on
this.
holiday.
We did, except not for my radio show, so we didn't go anywhere. We just had a little update going on, here. It was like we were buffering.
A vacation from our basement.
Right.
Our basement.
This could be Jason's basement. This is officially Jason's basement.
Well, then I'd have to become Jason for real.
Yeah.
It's Bo and Jason. It's Beth and Jason. You know what this is? Here's the thing. I've been wanting to say this ever since we started.
Yeah.
And after today, we will have done this podcast 9 times.
9 times. Welcome to episode 9 of the 17th segment, everybody. Like we were just saying, we are officially back after a lot of shows, like the Daily Show and John Oliver's show. A lot of shows take the month of August off. They take their little break because it's not usually a huge news time, August, traditionally. But that just has not been the case. This news cycle goes and goes and goes so incredibly quickly that we've just had to hang on for dear life, during some of this, and just go where the news cycle ends up taking us. This has been the hardest, I would say, one of the hardest weeks we've had as far as doing the show. We've had some heavy stories that we've told and that we've had to break on our show. I know that together we covered Uvalde, and that was really, really tough. We covered the shooting of the police officers that happened here in Charlotte last year, which was really, really tough. I found out live on the air basically that I knew one of the officers. That was really tough.
And
Colleen was tough.
Last August sort of changed back to your point about shows taking summer months off and us being away from the podcast for a month. And that's not the total. I mean, there have been things going on that technically that we had to kind of work out. I mean, we're eight episodes in. We're still trying to figure out, honestly, what this is, what you want to help us make it be, where it's going. And we said in the beginning we knew that was going to be the case. So it's still evolving, but we're back. And I would say most of the time, August, summer, it's kind of a
slow news time.
But last summer changed everything. Yeah. Last summer, when President Biden stepped down and they had roll back a little bit. They had that debate, and then President Trump had the assassination attempt. President Biden got out of the race. Kamala Harris, jumped aboard and did that campaign in fast motion.
107 days.
I've been doing this show for 13 years. You've been in the news business for a long time. I don't think I've ever seen a summer that turned upside down. And so honestly, ever since last year, all of what I used to think were the times of year that things happened that you could kind of plan around for the most part, I think that's all out the window. Yeah. I don't care what your political stripes are. I think the one thing that President Trump has done that people on both sides can agree is he's changed the landscape of what politics really are going forward, because he's the first president who's really done campaign events while he's in the White House. We've now, in the last couple of days, learned that he's going to do a Republican midterm national convention. And as we talked about on our show, the Democrats would be stupid not to do the same thing. It actually makes a lot of sense from a standpoint of a time of year where things are traditionally not really
slower
happening, and now you plug that in. So I'm bringing all that up to say is I don't know what the rules are anymore.
I don't think there are rules, and I think that's been one of the most fascinating parts about doing the kind of show that you and I do live every single day. And when Bo and I were talking about the 17th segment for today and coming back on after such a heavy week, we talked about this, and I just sharing with you all what it is like when you, and we've said this over and over again, that we attempt to, with our show, give as much good information to you as possible so that you can begin to assess the news story and do with it what you will, and think about it the way that you are going to end up thinking about it, and not trying to inject our own emotions or throw flames or inflame a situation more than it already is. And in the last 10 days, we've had really tough stories. And our week last week started as the national news was picking up the Irina Zarutska story, which we had covered already here locally. We had talked about it on our show locally. The local news media had covered it. But a reporter asked President Trump about it. And then President Trump did an address about it from the Oval Office. And then I think most importantly, that video of the surveillance footage came out of the incident from the train. The surveillance footage from the train came out, and I, like many other people, saw it, and you saw it too this way, just going through Twitter as we were preparing for the show. The video just popped up, and so I saw it without a warning that I was going to see it, and I think a lot of people ended up witnessing that video that way. And I was emotional on the air because I had just seen it and was kind of had a hard time asking questions of our cybersecurity expert, Teresa Payton, just talking about it. But little did we know in that time, we're covering that very difficult story that's very local and very personal to so many people here in Charlotte. And little did we know that 24 hours later, on our social media feeds, another video of another tragic, violent event would come across our feeds, and also in the same way, I saw it without knowing that I was what I was about to see. So many people had a similar experience. I heard from so many of our listeners saying that that's how they found out about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and we thought that today, as we talk about this, kind of what it's like to be a human being experiencing news headlines along with the rest of the country, but also being given the responsibility to tell those headlines and try to make sense of them by utilizing experts and utilizing conversations and also getting a temperature check and having conversations with our listeners. And all of that is so incredibly complicated and so incredibly emotional, Bo. I mean, do you agree with that? That there's a level of you have to put your own emotions aside, which is very difficult as a human being, but you also have to be able to filter out and try to figure out how to filter out the sensational news from the factual news, and try to get the best answers possible to keep an audience informed from the guests that you end up bringing in. And we struggled even who are the best voices right now to talk with us about this. Well, and it's something that you learn how to do over time. Which is a weird thing to learn how to do. Yeah, and I think both of us, when we met each other, we considered ourselves pretty good at being able to compartmentalize. I've always sort of had to, given the things that we cover on a daily basis, we can have a lot of fun in the studio, you all know that, but we also can be hit on a dime with something out of nowhere that immediately takes you to a different place, and you know that it's not appropriate to laugh it up anymore. And people depend on this radio station during times of tragedy to not only tell you what's going on, but because we have a medium where people call and now people text. There have been many times over the years, long before I ever was behind a microphone, but I was in a production capacity where I saw our station really just sort of become a sounding board in the community when things happened. And people call in, and it's not always, let me tell you my opinion,
let me bounce it off your opinion. Sometimes when you have a station that's heard as far and wide as this one is, the 50,000 watts sometimes are just a place to vent, a place to make your feelings heard, and someone out there will hear it. Maybe not even, maybe you're not even intent on the person who's hosting the show necessarily responding to it, but just getting it out there. And I know that because I've seen this station be in that capacity for a long time. You've been with me long enough. There are days when we know that we're part of the healing process.
And we heal along with our listeners, and we do consider the people who are part of our show and call us and text us. It does feel very intimate. It does feel very much like a family, and we're trying to help the people we care about understand something and process and deal and heal and grieve and all of those things. One of the things this past week that was really important to me, and I access this quote from Walt Whitman often, and it was actually, if you ever watched Ted Lasso, he used it in they used it in one of the episodes, but it's be curious, not judgmental. And the tragic nature of both of the stories that we spent the majority of our week talking about ignited debates within communities across the nation about very different things, everything from mental health to mass transportation to the homeless crisis to political temperatures and rhetoric, and all of these things are part of these stories, and it's very difficult because you know that human lives are involved, and you know that people are grieving and people are trying to make sense of it all. And in all of that, my goal is to try to not be judgmental, but to be curious about how complicated all of these conversations are and how complicated solutions are. And I spent time last week off the air having off-the-record conversations with officials and thought leaders and thoughtful people trying to understand perspectives and to try to make sense of different solutions and ideas. And I spent time trying to do that so that I could better ask questions and better present stories on the air in a way that didn't feel judgmental to people who were battling these storylines in their own ways, because we all have personal attachments to this city. When it comes to what happened with Irina Zarutska, we have personal attachments to how we are thinking about the future of mass transportation in this city. There are so many layers that make these stories not just black and white, not just anger and sadness. And there are so many levels, and my goal is always to try to understand the complexity of where people are coming from on their journey, because we're all on a journey in this life, and when we come up against difficult, heartbreaking, complicated stories, we can only meet them where we are on that journey and with the level of understanding that we have. And my goal is to always increase understanding, not only for myself, but hopefully for other people who are trying to process it too. Does that make sense? Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important to point out that here in 2025, we're at a point in human existence where everybody's got this camera and this phone in their hand and can immediately communicate with other people and provide reactions. And in some ways that's really, really good. And in other ways, I think about the two stories this week and the immediacy of, so we sort of jump to even political strife so quickly when we're not even a month away from when the stabbing happened, and the funeral for Charlie Kirk hasn't even happened yet.
Right.
And yet you're already seeing the temperature of the discourse in some places. Now, I will say, to the degree that we can control it, that's not what we've built a show for.
No.
Now, the great thing about WBT is you got lots of different people throughout the day, and each person does their show their own way. And there's a lot of political debate on our radio station. That's how it's designed. But when you have a story like this, I do have to pull back and say it's amazing to me. And I think part of it's because we have the ability to do this now, that people are already having conversations about things, not about investigations. Don't get me wrong. The investigation is of the utmost importance, but you know, some of the finger pointing that goes on and some of the accusations that go on that are part of kind of daily political discourse, when you have stories that are so tragic like this,
Yeah.
it does give me pause when you're in the middle of covering it, sort of saying to yourself, wow, this is still happening in real time. Like the mourning from the families are happening in real time, and you haven't had some of the necessary proceedings yet. And part of that is part of the discussion that happens as a result of these types of tragedies now happening so quickly is because, like I said a minute ago, the technology exists that it can happen. And then you think back to how it might have been processed 20, 30 years ago. Some things took their course before other things were allowed to be, you know, sort of fleshed out. Now, you know, sometimes you're talking about things and you have limited information, and we may be a week down the road and may learn something that if we had known it this time last week, the conversation might have been completely different. Like I said, I'm not saying that those, I mean, it's freedom of speech and technology makes it possible for us to do so many things. But we're talking about how do we really feel behind the scenes covering a week like last week where so much is just coming at you. Like out of a fire hose, and you're trying to process it all. And doing a show is one thing, but on a personal level where you're also dispensing information, it's a challenge sometimes. The way we live in today's modern society, because you know, there's no way you can't get emotional if you're scrolling through your daily activities and you happen across the video, the two different examples that you talked about, because there's the stabbing on the Charlotte light rail, and there are multiple angles because people have phones, and you know, as time goes on, it comes out that another person had this particular video of the. I mean, this was an event at the university in Utah that obviously was a pre-planned event, a huge crowd. I think often about how many young people were there just starting out college, and this breaks out. So it's all happening in real time now. And, you know, I've raised kids in an environment where, you know, cell phones were a thing. When our parents were raising us, they didn't have to worry about that. And in many ways, I sort of envy the fact that they didn't have to worry about that extra layer, because, you know, you don't grow up and all of a sudden know exactly how to navigate in the social media world. It's still evolving as we're talking right now.
Right. And I mean, and for us, just as human beings, we've, of course, are going to have a human reaction. I can't unplug my empathy. It just doesn't. It's just who I am as a person. I hurt for people. I hurt with people. I hurt. And in those moments, especially, you know, like Bo was saying, when we were young, if there's something they didn't want us to see, you just turn the TV off. You know, you turn the radio down if there's something you didn't want us to hear. But even I didn't even get the choice to not see the Charlie Kirk video or the Irina Zarutska video. I didn't even get the choice because I was prepping for our show and just saw it, and in the same way that it broke so many people to see, I had that same reaction.
Well, and whenever you're listening to this or watching it, don't misunderstand. And I said this on the air too. Neither one of us are saying that video shouldn't exist and be out there to be seen. What we're talking about is really a commentary on how the information gets from person to person. It's just where we are. It's not going to change. In fact, it's only going to get, I think it's only going to go more in the direction that it's going now. But we sat down and decided that we were going to get into some of the behind the scenes about how we cover a story or stories like have happened the last week. And we didn't go to school and take journalism classes or, a lot of broadcasting. I know for both of us, when you tell a young broadcaster, how do you make it in this business? Sure, you can go to school for certain things, but this is not a business where you go to school and when you're done, it places you in a position and boom, you're a news anchor. You have to pay your dues and climb the ladder. And on your way up, you learn from people. The things that we're encountering about the way news is disseminated now in 2025, we weren't taught this along the way because it didn't exist. So a lot of this is sort of, you figure out how you cover things as you navigate the new. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Yeah.
Well, and I think too, part of what becomes the news story is also the reaction, because the reactions from different people became very public, because people do share their reactions in real time, sometimes before they have a chance to fully intellectualize or think about something, often share reactions. And then sometimes you see people regret it and delete it. But in the world of social media, posts are never truly deleted. People have taken screenshots and that kind of thing. So that's where I come back to what I was saying about be curious, not judgmental, when it comes to having to even process a news story that the story itself is a reaction, is to not make the mistake of having a reaction to the reaction, and more try to take a deep breath and get a sense of where communication is coming from and why, and then figure out how to tell that story. And in all of that, I think the great thing about that, we are very lucky in this sense, is that we lean on each other. We lean on each other's sensibilities, our both of our levels of empathy, both of our. We lean on each other's knowledge of politics, of news coverage, the things that we know that we have done and ways that we have covered stories. And we rely on each other's expertise to try to strike the right tone in giving information to people, as to not elicit more reaction, is to not make the temperature go up more than it already is. I think our goal is always to take the human perspective from it in the best ways possible, and not excusing bad behavior by any stretch of the imagination, but to I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for.
You said something. You said the word tone. Tone is a tough thing to navigate. Mm-hmm. And again, getting back to, and part of what we like to do with this podcast is kind of take you behind the scenes and give you an idea of, you listen to the show and we pride ourselves in sort of being real on the air, but what's going on up here when certain things are happening on the air, because you always have to kind of think 5 minutes ahead of where you are. Now, then comes the moments where breaking news happens in an instant and you have to make a decision about something that's happened before 5 minutes are over. So, and I have an example that happened on the show yesterday that's sort of in the lighter direction to a degree, that sort of paints this picture for you. But tone is a very important thing to us because, as I said a few minutes ago, we're built a little bit differently than the rest of the shows on the station by design. Most of our colleagues will set out to do a 3-hour show or whatever allotment they have, and they'll talk about 3 or 4 big issues, dig deep into them, and phone calls and discussions will come out of that. We're doing a show that's designed for you to come at wherever you are in your commute or your daily routine during that 4 hours. And our goal is, if all things are equal and it's not an unusual day, we're just any number of things could be going on. We're trying to give you all the necessary information so that you can go out into the world and have conversations about any of those things. And maybe I always tell people we're kind of a mile wide and an inch deep, right? We don't have time to go a mile deep, but we try to go a mile wide and be this sort of conveyor belt that catches everything that might have happened, so that when you get to work or you get to school, you've kind of heard news, weather, traffic, sports, and in some days other directions from that.
Entertainment some days, so that you feel joyful going into your day.
And I know Beth wants you to come away from our show with a sense of hope, with a sense of it's not always going to be joy. Some days it'll be more festive than others, but you come away with a feeling of I'm ready to go out there and sort of, as Dr. Laura would say, take on the day, right? And tackle the world.
I think hope is probably the best. I mean, because even when we try, like this past week was so difficult, and we were also searching for hope. And I think sometimes in the darkest moments is when people look for hope the most, because they want to find a way through.
Well, that's why I said tone.
Yeah.
Because our struggle always ends up being, how do you know when to change the tone? How do you know? Because as soon as something like last week happens, a week where you have two huge things that are so unique,
so heavy.
One of them's local, but equally, I mean, how many things are going to happen in Charlotte that are as local as the light rail tragedy, and yet President Trump is speaking about it in the Oval Office within 48 hours? So it was a local story and a national story, maybe the most juxtaposed of those two things I've ever seen. And then 2 days later, if you told me there would be something that would come along that would not eliminate that story from being discussed, but it would sort of compete with it for top story billing, the Charlie Kirk assassination happens. And then you combine those two things and think about that week. And so we start thinking, and this is where I say on the other programs, things that happened last week will be lingering discussion pieces for weeks to come. On our show, they will be discussion pieces as different parts of the news gathering pieces of it come into play. For example, yesterday there's the arraignment of the suspect in Utah, and there will be things coming up in a few weeks. We found out today that there's going to be a House Judiciary hearing about what happened in Charlotte with the light rail. That'll be something we'll be discussing in the coming days. But we know that as you get further away from this, we sort of transition back into that show where we're giving you a little bit of everything, and we try to return to that tone where we like to live, where we like to be, of being hopeful, of being able to talk about lighter things and serious things. But there are weeks that come along, truth be told, like last week, where it sort of turns the whole show template upside down, and we immediately know we have to be in a certain place. And we're going to be there sometimes, Beth, as long as the listeners tell us to be there.
And we had an example of that today, and today being Wednesday, the 16th. I never know the day. The 17th.
It's the 17th day.
And by the way, you're listening and watching the 17th segment.
The 17th segment. But today we were talking about, we had a couple of lighter stories. And in those discussions, we got texts from a lot of you saying, man, I needed this. Man, I needed to smile today. Man, I'm so glad that you guys are talking about something light right now. I was feeling heavy. I needed to smile again after last week. And those are the moments that we know that, okay, so you all are feeling kind of the way that we were feeling. We wanted to take a deep breath and smile for a minute too. And the fact that you all wrote us and said the same thing, then we know that we're kind of in all of this, we're in it together, and that we are understanding and feeling similarly.
Anonymity.
And so we appreciate the fact that you all communicate that to us, that when you, it's kind of, I don't know if you all remember this, but right after, if you were alive when 9/11 happened. It was shortly after.
Oh, and by the way, that anniversary was last week too.
Yeah, that anniversary, the 24th anniversary of that was last week as well. But Saturday Night Live, Rudy Giuliani was on the stage and basically, and I'm paraphrasing, said, we need to laugh. It's okay to laugh. And we were having that discussion together with each other off the air.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking of, can we be funny? And he said, why start now?
Why start now? And so it's that kind of feeling that we get to a place where we realize that part of the responsibility of communicating is giving permission sometimes to feel something good, even when things have felt heavy. And when you know that other people are experiencing really heavy emotions, that there is something about what we do that can help people take baby steps toward a different emotion.
Well, I mean, the segment we started, and this is just a brainchild we had, about a month ago, about the Tell Me Something Good that we do on Fridays, that we've been doing to a degree
for about a month
every
or so.
week. Some days more than others, depending on what else you got going on, but you find room for it. But this idea of tell us something good that happened in your life or something that you want to put out there over the 50,000 watts. And here again, we didn't know if Friday of last week was the right time to do that again, given the week. And I'll be honest with you, going into it, I thought, this doesn't feel right. And we had conversations about it and said, you know what, the listeners will tell us. And now that we have a text line, we can sort of float that out there. And if Friday had come along last week around 7:50, which is when we normally do it, and we were getting nothing, or we were getting, the tons of texts to say, don't do this, we wouldn't have done it. We've invited you into this process. And so when you sort of tell us what you're feeling, we trust that. I mean, that's part of the collective sort of emotion that we tap into. But like you said, we got tons of texts. We even got a few that were unsolicited before even asked.
Yeah, we were surprised, but we got emails, not only text messages, but emails too, from people saying, please tell me that you're going to do your Tell Me Something Good segment this Friday. I think we need it more than ever. We got requests for it. And like Bo was saying, before we even said that we were going to do it, people instinctively started sending us their good news about, one guy had delivered his daughter's child in their living room because she didn't make it to the hospital in time. And people celebrating birthdays and people who I think were probably struggling, like, how do I celebrate my anniversary when my heart feels so heavy? And kind of used us to help lift them into a place where they could feel that it was okay for them to celebrate their anniversary, on a day where their hearts were feeling heavy. And we were blown away by the fact that our phone lines and our text lines just exploded with people wanting to say something good out loud about their lives because they needed to remember that good is still there. And I think those are the hardest things to find and to navigate when hearts are broken and when news headlines are heavy. Is we do all still have to figure out ways to keep taking a step forward, and sometimes that means reminding ourselves about the good that exists in whatever small way we can and whatever big ways that we can. And that's huge.
That's a really important point that you make. And if you're listening or watching and you did not hear that part of our show last week, I don't mean to suggest to you that we turned on a dime and then everything is as it was. What I mean is that we decided, are we going to take a moment during the show this week to tap into a little bit of that part to give people that moment? Because of course there's much more to come out about these two stories. And we have since that segment talked about, those stories a good bit, but I do think it gave us sort of the moment to know that, okay, you can sort of turn the ship a little bit this way. And that's what we have to navigate. I mean, look, I can tell you from personal experience, things things in my personal life that some of which have been talked about on the air, there's a part of my heart that's shattered forever. But you have to figure out how to live your life to a degree where you can find positive things again. And, unfortunately, this is something that I can talk about personally, but that's the same thing that you have to do to a degree in a position like this when you're doing a radio show. We have built the show on a lot of pillars, and one of those pillars is we're going to tell you the bad news, but we're also going to give you reasons to be hopeful about what you have left in your day, whatever that may be. So everybody is going down this road with a different set of circumstances, and I don't have to tell you that. I don't have to tell Beth that, but I can tell you that with this podcast, we're, again, trying to sort of let you into how we make decisions. And so I said earlier I had an example, and this is sort of it's light, but it's not light, but I'm going to tell you it anyway because it'll sort of illustrate what we sort of have to make decisions about during a show. We were yesterday, just past 8 o'clock, having what I would most definitely consider one of our happier, upbeat, just messing around segments. We were talking about our fantasy football league that we started. And we're talking about Beth's team, and we're talking about the scores. And I'm thinking, okay, so look, the punchline of the story to a degree is I had the highest score of the week last week.
That's not the punchline. That's him bragging.
But wait a minute. You'll see where I'm going.
Yeah, I know.
I was very happy about saying I scored this many points because I've played fantasy football since 2001. I don't know how many leagues. I've never scored as many points as I did this week in this league, 148. Okay, we're talking about our scores, and we're working around to tell them what Bo's score is, and then we tell Beth's score and Zoki, and he's in first place, and all these things, and then I'm about to come around to say, okay, this is how much I beat your dad by, and then I look up on the screen, and Bernie points to it, and it says Robert Redford has died.
Okay, that's the second time you've now done this, Bo.
It was Steve.
It was Steve who pointed at the screen.
It was Steve. He was Steve.
I pointed to a Nick, and I said,
that was it. That was totally it.
But I said, and as I said this, I'm thinking in the moment, okay, the whole point of this was to build towards, I want to tell you what my fantasy football, and now Robert Redford has died. What am I going to do? Go, oh, hang on, more on this in a minute. Back to my fantasy football. I can't do that. No. And Robert Redford passing one of the most recognizable, famous actors of our time.
An icon. And
I, in the moment there, basically know, okay, that segment just ended. We've got to go to something else. And I'm telling you this now in the context of it, but that's kind of a micro example of sort of these decisions we have to make about tone and what is appropriate at a given time. And sometimes you have times to plan for this stuff, and sometimes it happens in the moment. And again, I'm also not equating Robert Redford passing away at advanced age to a tragedy that happened, either one of those examples we talked about in Charlotte last week. Of course I'm not, but I'm saying Robert Redford passing away is a complete tonal shift of a story that we have to immediately acknowledge, but we're in the middle of something sort of, having fun with. And there in the moment yesterday, I had to say, you know what? I don't know if they're ever going to hear what my fantasy football score was, but it ain't now. And we had to move on, and we did. And there you go. It's just an example of, tonal decisions you have to make when you do a show like ours. But I think listeners, I hope you appreciate us being transparent about what we sort of have to navigate through. And granted, it's not like being a surgeon or something. We're not rocket scientists here, but we're trying to produce a product for you that you all have come to show us that you like. And I don't know if we get it right every day. It's 4 hours every day, and there are days that I come out of it and I'm like, I wish I had that one to do over again, or I'm not so sure that was the best way that could have been said. But the feeling that I have to hope for after it's over is that we can look at each other and our team in the room, Bernie and that guy, Steve.
Yeah, don't worry. Just move right along.
That we feel like we've been in the right neighborhood.
Well, I think, and I think this is kind of the way that we end this. I think the main thing that we want you to know, and I think that you're probably understanding from how we're talking about how tough this is we care a lot. We care about you a lot. And Bo will tell you this about me. I care about the world a lot. And it's one of the reasons that we've talked sometimes about how our show, these like rejoins that people hear of movie clips. He has the clip that says, you know, do you want to be good or do you want to change the world? And that is there because Bo knows that my heart aches over the state of the world often. And the main thing that we try to do is make sure that we let you know that we care and we handle the ways that we communicate because we care and we want you to go out and live your best life possible, thinking about stories in the best way possible. And by best, I mean, you know, the most three-dimensional way possible, because stories are difficult, but thinking about them in a three-dimensional way sometimes is helpful in processing. And so the main thing we want you to know is that we care a whole lot about what we do, and we care a whole lot about who we do it for, and that's for our listeners and for you out there.
Well, and if you don't mind me adding in, I mean, you know, when you're talking about what we do and how we do it. I think one of the other things, and we had this conversation in the studio last week, we had this conversation even today when we were talking about, you know, are we going to do 17th segment and how are we going to do the 17th segment? One of the things that our listeners told us that they needed, and I think that we all in the room needed, and around the building in general was, and we referred to it in the room as an exhale moment. That we've been going and everything is very heavy. And at a certain point, you just kind of need an exhale moment. And most of the time for us, that tends to be, you know, a good chunk of the show on and off, but especially on Fridays with the Tell Me Something Good, is those are kind of those exhale moments where you get to just go, you know what, things aren't great. Things are maybe bad, but also they could be worse, but there are still good things that we can look at and go, but there's still this. At least we have this. And those are those exhale moments. And I feel like that's a good way of phrasing it, simply because I think that's something that everybody can relate to, is just those moments where you kind of stop and just, and you have that kind of, you know,
reset. Yeah.
You can just pull back and go, yeah, it's not, you know, things aren't great, but there are still those bits that we can pull from that are those good moments. And it is that Tell Me Something Good. It's that staple Friday segment now.
That was so well said, Bernie.
Are we done with this podcast?
I mean, Steve.
There you go. There's Bo Thompson at his finest.
Well, look, you mentioned the quote. Steve knows the quote. Some of you may recognize that quote. Are you going to be good? Are you going to be good? Or are
you going to change the world?
You're going to change the world. It's from the new Thunderbolts, the new Avengers movie. And it's Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and she says that. And it's, are you going to be good or are you going to change the world? And then, what if I want to do both? And I think that's a good place to end, because we're not going to change the world every day. I don't know if we've ever changed the world. We are trying to be that light that hits somebody each day. And even with your song, we've had a couple of people over the years call in and say, I needed to hear that today. Sometimes seriously, sometimes not. But I'm hoping over 4 hours we say something that's what somebody out there needs to hear that day for whatever reason. So can you be good? Can we be good? Try to be good. We hope to be. But the most important thing of all is trying to be both every day. And you don't always hit that mark, but I think that's a good, it's a good thing to strive for.
Yeah, you can only, I don't know why I'm getting emotional. I'm getting all teary-eyed over here. You can only change the world by being the best possible version of yourself in the space that you're given on this earth, the space that you're given, and then affecting the people around you in the best ways that you know how, so that they can then change their little space of the world. And that is how you, in fact, change the world, is by being the best version of yourself that you can be with the people around you. And it's what we do with each other. And it's why I think we're a really good team, because we rely on each other and rely on each other's hearts in tough moments. But also because we feel responsible to all of you. And we do believe that you can be good and you can change the world in small ways every day.
Yeah. While we're at it, let's try for both, right? And it's been a heavy few weeks. This has been, I think, easily the heaviest of these podcasts that we've done, but
oh, for sure,
but necessary. And as we sort of evolve what this is, we're bringing you along the way, and I hope you appreciate that fact.
Go out and be curious.
9 times. 9 times.
Listen to Good Morning BT with Bo Thompson and Beth Troutman live weekdays 6 to 10 on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.